In this video, we are going to learn array data structure. First of all, we need to know why array data structure is needed. Assume there is a class of 5 students, and if you want to keep records of their marks in examination, then we can do this by declaring 5 variables individual and keeping track of records. But what if the number of students become very large? It would be challenging to manipulate and maintain the data. What it means is that we can use normal variables like v1, v2, v3 when we have a small number of objects. But if we want to store a large number of instances, it becomes very difficult to manage them with normal variables. The idea of an array is to represent many instances in one variable. That means we can store our data in a single variable with array data structure. And that's how we can minimize the time and space complexities. Okay, we have known why data structures is needed. Now, let's move on to the next part. What is an array? Array is a collection of items of same data types stored at contiguous memory locations. Okay, let's break down this definition into 3 parts. The first one is, an array is a collection of items. Here we can see an example. We have created an array and stored some integer value like 2, 4, 10, 5. Each and every number is a collection of array. Then we can see same data type. That means we have to store same data type in an array. In our case, we have stored some integer value in this array like 2, 4, 10. Also, we can store some character value like A, B, C. In the same way, we can store string value or float value. But we cannot mix up different type of data type. Like if you want to store both integer and character value at the same time, then this is not the right way to store data in an array. So we can store one data type in an array at a time. Okay, nice. Then here we see contiguous memory locations. Here we can see an example. We have created an array variable and this variable has a memory location. Assume the memory location is 200. Here I have stored a string inside this array in the first position. If I want to store a value in the next position of this array, we need a memory location, and the next position memory location will allocate by data type size, because we know different type of data type has different type of size, or we can call it takes different type of space, like character takes 1 bit, integer takes 4 bit, and so on. In our case, we're storing a character data type, and we know character data types takes 1 bit to store in memory. That's why we have to add our bit number with our previous memory location. So 200 plus 1 is equal to 201, and in the same way 201 plus 1 is equal to 202, and so on. So now let's move on to the next part. Here we need to understand some basic terminologies of array, like array index, array element, as well as array length. First of all, array index. What is array index? In this picture, we can see those are some elements of an array, and here we're just giving unique identifier of each element, and we call this identifier array indexes. Next, array element. Every items and collections are array elements. Then array length. We can see here we have 6 elements in this array, so this is the length of this array, that is 6. And in this case, our length will be 7, and those are indexes and those are array element. Okay, nice. We successfully understand basic terminologies of array. Now let's move on to the next part, that is array in JavaScript. But before you do that, we need to set up our environment for writing code in JavaScript. First of all, to set our coding environment, we need a code editor. In our case, we will use VS Code editor. So go to this VS Code editor site and just download for your system. I'm using Windows operating system. That's why I need to download this installer. And the second thing is Node.js. We need Node.js to run our code in our computer. So just download this recommended version and just simply install it. Okay, after installing, just open the VS Code editor. It will look like this, and then open the terminal. Here we need to make sure Node.js installed or not. Just write node ---- version. Here we can see a node version, that is version 20.909.0. That means we have successfully installed Node.js. Nice. Now here we need to create a file called index.js. Then press enter. We need to use .js extension because we want to write JavaScript code. And then just simply log it, something value, to check it's working or not. Now we need our VS Code extension, that is search here code runner and just install this extension in your VS Code editor. This extension will help us to run our JavaScript code. After installing this extension, we will see this icon in here. That means we have successfully installed this extension. And then just simply click here. It will automatically run our file. Now we can see in our terminal it is working. Okay, nice. Now let's move on to the next part, JavaScript arrays. Now we will cover those things. First of all, declaration of an array. How we can declare array in JavaScript. There are basically two ways to declare an array. The first one is using array literal, and the second way is using the JavaScript new keyword. Let's first see array literal. First of all, we need to create a variable and give the variable name anything that you want. In our case, we want to store student age. So I'm giving the variable name is age. Then we need to give a square bracket and give some integer number by separating comma, like 10, 11, 12, 13. Now we want to console it. So just simply console.log age and run your program. Just click on run. Here we get our array like this. Nice. And then we can also declare an array by using new keyword. So do the same thing. Let age is equal to new array. And here we need to give array length. That means size of an array. Give the size 3, and then we need to push some data inside this age array. To do this, just call this variable, then open the square bracket and write the index number. We want to push our data in the first location on an array, and we know array index starts from 0. Just give the index number 0 is equal to 10. And then copy the same thing 3 times. The second index number, that is 1, and then give 2. And change this data like 11 and 12. Now just console it. Then run this program. And we get same things like we get before. So we can use any method that we want. But in our case, we will use this system because this is more efficient than this system. Nice. Now let's move on to the next part. That is accessing elements of an array. Now how we can access this array element? We can access just simply by doing this. Call this array variable and then open a square bracket. Now give an index number that we want to access. In our case, we want to access the first value of this array. That's why we need to give 0, and then we just simply copy this and paste inside this console function. That's how we can get our first element. Just run this, and here we can see the first value of this array, that is 10. Nice. Just clean everything and then get all the value from 0 index to 3. So 0, 1, 2, and 3. Now if I run this, we get every single element of an array. Now let's move on to the next part, that is change element from a predefined array. Let's say we want to change first value 10 to 50. How do you do this? Just we have to call this array variable, then square bracket, then we need to give the location or index number where we want to change something. In our case, we want to change in 0th position. So give the 0 index. Now we need to give what data we want to define. Let's say 50, and Then just simply copy this console log and comment out and run this. Here we can see in the first position the number has changed, and in the same way we can change every position that we want. Like age, we want to change the third position, so we need to give the index number 2, then give the value 30 and run this program. We see 50, 11, 13 and 30. Now we want to convert this array into a string. But first of all, we need to know what is a string. The string look like this, something data inside this quotation, and this is called a string. Now we want to convert this array into a string. To do this, we have a function or method called toString. Just call this array variable and then call this method toString. Just copy it and paste inside the console to see in our terminal, and then just run this. Here we see it has converted into a string. If I console it before converting into a string, console.log age, and then run it, you will see the difference between after converting a string and before. We see before converting this array into a string, it's look like this, and after converting this array into a string, it's look like this. Nice. That means we have successfully converted this array into a string. Nice. Move on to the next part. Now we want to increase and decrease the length of an array. Before I do this, first of all, we want to print the length of this array. So call this age variable, and then we have a method called length, and then just console it. If I run this, the length of this array is 4 because we have 4 elements inside this array. If I add another element inside this array and run this, now here we see we get the length 5. Just call this age and then call this length method. We want to increase this length into 6. Now if I run this, we see the length is 6. Now we want to decrease this length. Just give the length is equal to 3 and then run it, and here we see the length is 3. And that's how we can increase and decrease the length of an array. Okay, now let's move on to the next part. That is, we want to print every element at a time with single console log. But let's see this what we did before. Before we was accessing by copy and pasting console.log and gave each index number with hard-coded. Now we want to print those every element dynamically. How do we do this? We can do this by using loop. Just open a for loop, and this loop will run from 0 to array length. So give this array age.length, and here we will get every element and then just print those elements. Make sure you have to iterate this array. So give this array age and just run it. Here we can see we get all the elements of an array at a time. Now let's move on to the next part, that is adding new elements to JavaScript array. How do we do this? We can use a push method to add some element inside this array. Age.push. Suppose we want to add 33 and then simply run it. Here we get 33. We can add more data like 32 and then run it. We get 33. So those are some basic exercise to understand JavaScript array in a better way. Now one important things in JavaScript, arrays are also known as object, and we can see this with type of operator. So here if I log this and we want to know the age type, what type this variable, just call this type of operator, then give this array and run it. Here we can see this is the object type. What the difference between JavaScript arrays and objects? JavaScript arrays use indexes as numbers. Now, when to use JavaScript arrays and objects. Arrays are used when we want element names to be numeric, and on the other hand, objects are used when we want elements names to be strings. So, we have successfully understood what is array, and we have exercised some basic things related to JavaScript array. Thanks for watching this video. Make sure to subscribe this channel. Bye-bye.